Thank you, Ashley. Alexander and I started working together, must be a year and a half ago almost, and thinking what we could do with the games and eye tracking. And about 9 months ago, stars aligned with Pico coming out with eye tracking enabled headsets, Starcade Arcade having a refresh of a really exciting game going on. So we jumped into putting eye tracking to the test in actual games. So we're here to talk about the Starcade Arcade's new refresh game.
Excited to be here. I'm Alexander, CEO and founder of Starcade Arcade. We've built and published 3 VR games, Starblazer, Virus Popper, and Space Slurpees. Starblazer was our first game that was first released in PC VR, and then this summer, we are remaking it and releasing it in mobile VR for the first time. With this remake, it's the perfect time to optimize the title and make it even better. So this is when we partnered with Tobii and discussed how can we make Starblazer even better as a title, and what are some of the things we can use eye tracking for to help us get there. Starblazer is a real-time strategy game. Real-time strategy games you might be familiar with in like the flat space would be StarCraft, so kind of think of that and have that in mind. Real-time strategy can be very difficult to make and also very difficult to play, which is one of the reasons why we really wanted to enhance the title with eye tracking. The way this presentation is designed is I want to give you all the most value for your time, so I'm going to talk about 3 features that really helped us as we're rebuilding this game, all eye tracking features, and then I'm also going to talk about a learning for each one during the development process. So if you want to build in eye tracking in your content, games, or applications, hopefully you can get some learnings from that and learn from our experiences. First off, I'm going to talk about contextual information. Now, pretty much everybody here has probably had a VR experience. I'm going to assume because you came to this convention. If you think back to the first time that you played VR, you were probably very excited. Again, that's why we're all here, right? But you might have also been very overwhelmed. This is something I've noticed as I've introduced people to VR for the first time. There's a lot of information to take in. Now, trying to make a strategy game on top of an already overwhelming experience can be exhausting for the user. When we first released Starblazer, people were like, this looks exciting, but I'm stressed. So eye tracking has allowed us to hone in on the information that we put in front of the user so that they're not overwhelmed. We don't want to clutter them with lots of information and statistics. We want to make their decision-making streamlined and easier for them to play the game so they can relax and enjoy it. Now, I'll point out from this graphic, whenever you see this floating white circle, this is representative of where the user's eyes would be looking. So in this example, you can see how, as they look at different types of ships, they get information about their abilities. And during the game, you can see different statistics and how they operate.
And looking at that eye movement, one easy thing to think of is, hey, I want to control everything with my eyes completely hands-free. So we thought we'd give you an X-Men explanation here, how to think about this. If you remember Magneto, he can do anything with his mind just by looking with things, but he's always adding some sort of explicit command with his hands. And if you remember Cyclops' first experience of getting his powers, it's completely out of control until he gets his glasses on, where he actually has a button. So a lot of the things that Alexander and the team did was finding ways to combine the eye tracking of attention with explicit motor commands from controllers, which becomes super powerful.
Absolutely. When Johan first shared with me the Cyclops example, it very exactly put in like a visual representation to me the feeling of having eye tracking. Because yes, it's extremely powerful, and obviously I'm talking about the benefits to the game, but at the same time, it requires careful development and balance. Otherwise, it in itself becomes an overwhelming experience. You don't want to have the Midas touch of eye gazing where everything you look at creates a reaction. That's honestly too much. And so when it comes to this information, this contextual info that we give to the user, yes, it's super helpful and it makes the experience better, but it needs to be designed carefully. So one example of how we met this balance was you can see a timeline of what it would look like for UI within our game. Now, we all want to see that Iron Man UI UX experience where you look and you get information. To get that type of experience, you have things such as animations, as well as how much time it takes to trigger. So for us, it took a lot of fine-tuning to wait and see, OK, how long do we want to wait before we actually trigger the interaction so that a user is intentionally looking at something? And then after that, you have to allow time for the actual animation itself, because it's not just static objects. There's going to be these little pop-ups, and you can see the health bar moving. So you have to allow time for the animation. And then at that point, we pause and hold, specifically for your peripherals. Because just like you could have the Midas touch by looking at something, you could have the Midas touch by turning away. And if the second you look away from something, it disappears, this also can be chaotic. So we actually hold the UI until the next intentional trigger from another ship or another object or UI. The second area that I want to talk to you about was in object selection. So before this, I just showed extra information that you can get by looking at objects. But Starblazer being a real-time strategy game, we also wanted to build in the ability for assistance to users in their decision-making and their playtime. So imagine Starblazer, you've got two fleets of ships, you're battling each other in real time. I openly admitted this can be overwhelming experience, and so we want to do anything that we can to help the users while they're playing. And so in this case, we allow you to actually select ships just by looking at them, because it's very easy to look at a ship, and we know very intentionally if that's the ship that you're looking at when you select, we can enable you to control it and command it in battle. Now, for the learning that goes with this, I would say exercise caution. Us loving technology and being engineers at heart, when we first got our hands on the eye tracking technology, we went crazy. On the UI, I had individual triggers within the UI, so if I looked at the strength statistics, additional localized titles would pop up, the health would expand. And the example on the left is what I would say you probably don't want to do. You want to be very smart and selective about what is gaze-enabled so that you give the best experience. So what we ended up doing with our UI was whenever the UI expands, that then becomes an aggregate trigger area for our colliders. So it doesn't spawn off new types of interactions, it just stays as a part of that collective object. This way, when I'm looking at this ship, the medic, I can see additional information, it runs through animations, but it's not going to be a complete chaotic experience. It's a pleasant one.
And a lot of this comes back to how the eyes work. At Tobii, we've been studying eye movements for 20 years, and this is a recording from the field in a car, obviously. And you see the driver's gaze point as a red dot. And what you'll notice here when they look over to the left is that the eye is always ahead of the hand. And if you start thinking about it, we pretty much always look at what we're going to touch before we do it. And bringing that back to user experience and what kind of input paradigms you can do, it means that the classic VR interaction of looking at an object, reaching out, pointing with a laser pointer or some sort of mechanical device, and then issuing a command with a trigger, you can actually reduce that to a two-step process where we just look and click, because that look indicates the place of intention.
And this leads us to the final value proposition that I wanted to discuss today. I'm actually leaving you with what I consider one of the simplest implementations of eye gazing within applications and games. Part of that's because not everybody in here, I hope, is building a VR space strategy game. Otherwise, you're my competitor. But pretty much every VR application or game is going to have a menu. And this is one of the things that we enabled for eye tracking and eye gaze selection. And so anybody in here could implement something like this into their application or game, and it delivers tremendous value of, again, allowing the users to very quickly select menu items because their eyes are going to travel faster than their hands.
And throwing in there is that this also coexists beautifully with existing controller paradigms, where you use a laser pointer for point at things, but you can then, if you take it away, just use the eyes plus the same control mechanisms on the controller. And that's, I
Right.
know that both you and us have found that very intuitive.
Absolutely. We have found that a number of users that have started playing the beta of the new Starblazer, once they get used to eye tracking and realize that it's there, they almost exclusively use it for selection because it's so easy. However, we're going to have all types of users with all types of preferences, which is why we do have to have your typical laser pointer, raycast selection enabled, but working in harmony with eye tracking. So the biggest learning that I would like to share with you all, should you develop these with eye tracking software, is still you should prioritize hand movement, because hand movement is going to be the most intentional. In fact, with our eyes, we like to think we control where we're looking, but in reality, we know that our eyes can tend to wander and gaze at different things just idly with our mind, and the same thing's going to happen during a game. So you want the user to be able to look around, and in Starblazer, they'd be looking around the battlefield of the different ships. But if they point to a ship very intentionally, even if they're looking someplace else, we have to make sure we prioritize that hand movement over the eye movement. So what you can see from this example is, again, the white circle is where the eyes are looking. And if there's no laser pointer, we'll select the ship that the eyes are looking at. If there is a laser pointer, regardless of where the eyes are looking, we prioritize that interaction first. And then always we still require button press because it's very intuitive. People know to press buttons, and that means a user truly intends to interact with that object.
And when using that same button press for the interaction, we've actually seen also that users not only learn over time to use one or the other, but they actually shift between them. Like they get an intuition for in which context they want to use laser pointer and when they just want to look at the eyes, and develop that quite naturally. So it's really, really cool to see actually in player testing.
Yes, yeah, we've been very satisfied. These are 3 value propositions that we implemented in our game, but honestly, there's lots of things that you can do with eye tracking.
And we've touched on the first ones where natural interaction, this hand-eye coordination, is very powerful. Attentive UI, making user interfaces, 2D or 3D, respond to gaze. It gets this magical feeling where the objects around you just gently signal, yes, I know you're paying attention to me, with a highlight of some sort. Social awareness is obviously a big topic this year. A lot of energy is going into avatar systems and remote social collaboration, and adding actual facial expressions, eye movements to avatars is night and day. We have some demos that I'd encourage you to try out just to turn it on and off and see how much more lively avatars become when they actually reflect where you're looking at. Then there's a whole field of immersive graphics and making devices better. Many of you probably heard about foveated rendering, where you can, if you direct the GPU resources to the point where you're actually focusing, that's the only thing we have in high resolution. So anything outside that point, you can downgrade graphics without the user noticing, and suddenly you free up a bunch of GPU resources that you can make even cooler graphics and more lights and more shiny surfaces with. And then finally, actionable insights is a big thing in development as well. At Tobii, a lot of our history is in analyzing human behavior with eye tracking and research, and that comes into the gaming space as well, where just knowing and tracking where people are looking, where they're turning their heads, what their controllers are doing, and what they're paying attention to gives huge insights into game development and the player experience. And there's some really cool tools. So we have some from Tobii. NVIDIA announced a couple yesterday for recording VR sessions. And for those of you who want to continue and explore this more, this is a great year to do it. Eye tracking is coming into consumer VR headsets this year. Tobii is providing as much knowledge as we have amassed over the last 2 decades to equip the ecosystem to do better experiences, really take advantage of eye tracking coming out on a broad front now. So our developer zone, vr.tobii.com/SDK, is a great place to just go in and learn, see examples, or get code snippets, get learnings and blog-like entries, and a couple of downloads to just try a lot of these things out for yourself.
Definitely, and I'd encourage anybody to do so. The Tobii team has been great to work with, and the SDK is very easy, and they didn't pay me to say that. So we're really excited about this release. Definitely be looking for Starblazer, the patch in this release to mobile VR we're calling Starblazer Factions. And so you can follow us on our social media, anything, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And you can follow the release this summer, which will have all the eye tracking features, as well as a lot of other features that fans of the RTS genre within VR have been asking us for. And if you want to see it in person, you don't have to believe me. You can actually go upstairs. Tobii has demos set up, and specifically they have an open house at 4:30. So I'd love for you to check out the demo and give us some feedback.
For sure. And if you don't have time to come up later, we do have some time for questions here now, if we have any. Yes, grab a mic, jump up, grab a mic. I think the audio team will be happy with us.
Hi. Okay, the SDK, what headset would you suggest? I mean, well, I was gonna say Pico is one, but just to play around with the SDK just for fun, not really do anything too crazy, but just to kind of check it out. It seems like it would be easy, but what headsets would you suggest that's not going to kill my bank account? So
You want me to
Pico,
speak to it?
I was
Yeah,
gonna say
I think
Pico.
this is perfect.
Okay,
question for you, 'cause
I'll
you have
tell
this-
you what we did, and I
Okay,
think it worked
cool.
really well
Sure.
in terms of our development.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about bank account.
Well,
I've
I know.
broke
I live
my
in the
bank
Bay
account with
Area,
headset.
so
Oh, okay.
yeah.
What we did is we actually used one of the PC VR solutions like the Vive Eye,
Yeah.
because that's easiest when I'm developing. It's literally, I'm on my computer, I grab the headset, and I test things within our Unity editor.
Okay.
And so that's very quick,
Yep.
rapid development and prototyping. I can, that timing, you
Yep.
saw how meticulous it was. That takes some fine tuning, and so it helps to be able to do that real time.
Yep.
And then definitely the Pico headset is what we used when we were testing like our mobile VR solution.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you're building a whole Android APK,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Shooting for Android. Which Pico headset, if you don't mind me asking, is it these days that you're working with Tobii?
It's the one that has eye tracking is the Neo 3 Pro Eye.
Thank you. Okay.
So that's the one that's on the market now. The Pico
Yep.
Neo 2i had it as well, but that's not available. So
Great, yeah.
go with the Pro Eye. And again, I can't stress enough that just how nice it's going to be to develop with something where you can press play in the editor.
Sure.
And I know on the Android side things are moving, so you're starting to be able to do that as well. But that's going to save you so much headache.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that SDK looks fun. So thank you.
It is,
It
and
is.
you can run it as is and play with samples even without a headset.
Hi there, great talk, guys. Just a quick question with regards to actually the last point, I think, in terms of the use cases, which is to do with the analytics side of things. So I was actually just really interested, is there anything included within the SDK or anything you can point to that, like any recommendations of solutions that might be out there for developers to pick up and use? Because I can definitely see the value of that additional data with regards to building applications, like where users are going, what they're looking at, what they're spending their time doing, some really useful stuff there. So is there any kind of points you can say to that effect?
Yeah, sure. There are a couple of places I would point to. We have a learning section on the dev zone where you'll get a lot of okay, but how do I really do this? What can I measure? How do I calculate that? Then from Tobii side, we have an extension to our SDK with advanced eye tracking and various filter and analysis tools. And that also has a framework for recording eye tracking data and replaying outside, so you get the data handling covered for you. Awesome. So those are really useful tools. If you want to go bigger and you have actual analytics suites, a company called Cognitive 3D does great work with analytics application, or an extended analytics SDK, I should say, for VR.
Yeah, I think the imagery that you had up before, painting heat maps,
Yeah.
on the actual level itself, looks like a really cool concept. Just
Yeah.
a very easy way to visualize where users are looking, where they're spending their time, that kind of thing.
So something that out of the box is hard to find still. I think Cognitive 3D is the most fully fledged solution, but even there you'll find you might want to.
I can imagine some of it needs some custom tweaks depending on what you're doing, but yeah, awesome.
And then also again, shout out for NVIDIA's VCR, I think is the name of that SDK, which also is a really good way of recording sessions to then replay input into the same application and be able to do automated QA or just watching what a player tester actually did during a session afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you were talking about trying to avoid the cognitive overload. I wonder, when you analyze the data, how can you tell that based on the eye tracking, when was the user experiencing cognitive overload?
I would say for me, it was more anecdotally, we've taken Starblazer to many conventions. We've, of course, talked to different players of the game, and the feedback that we got was, it's beautiful, I love what you're doing, we need more strategy games in VR, but I suck at it, right? And you start to hear more statements like that of people feeling like they weren't empowered. I mean, that's ultimately what they're telling me. What they're saying is that they're not very good at it, or they didn't quite understand, I'm not very good at strategy games. But as a developer, you need to kind of filter that down and say, they're not saying that they're bad. I don't believe that they're bad gamers. It's the problem is in my UI and UX. And so that's why it's been our mission the past few years to really just continue to simplify the experience so that anybody could pick up the game and say, you know what, I'm pretty good at strategy games. Like, ultimately, that's what we want. And so it was just by watching users testing and playing, and when you hear that people are stressed, not relaxed, then that's a good sign that they're overwhelmed.
If you didn't have user interviews available, is there any pattern, like analyzing the data, just the players' data, could you tell like when they were experiencing? Like, are there any patterns when you could tell that they probably were experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. And of course, I'd always encourage get in front of users as soon as possible. But if you were just to look at the data, I think one of the biggest indicators of users being overwhelmed would be the lack of interaction. Mm-hmm. If a user, in the case of Starblazer, right, you've got lots of ships moving around, you've got a real-time battle taking place. We didn't want it to be turn-based. And if they're just standing there, they're actually not clicking ships, they're actually not interacting with their menus. And that freeze moment is your indicator that they're feeling overwhelmed, versus somebody who's very comfortable playing your game is going to interact with it. They're going to be a bit more active and attentive to what they're doing within the game. And so you would actually see more of those interactions. Tells you on the right track.
Thank you so much.
If you're looking, just to throw in there, if you're looking for tool sets, there is a lot of research on things like cognitive load that uses eye movements and pupil size quite extensively to detect. And there's convincing research that you can actually build machine learning models for a specific context that can detect when the user is cognitive overloaded. They tend to be pretty context specific though. So there are a couple of engines that do a pretty good job. HP has their Omnicept SDK, for example, that actually detects cognitive load. Mm-hmm. And that gives you an indication, but I think you'll always find that you want to go back to your use case and see what do these numbers or these kind of hesitations mean in this particular application. Make it for your own. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's sneak in this last question. Try to make it fast if you can. No pressure.
Hi. Thanks. Great presentation. In terms of tooling support for the intentionality between eye tracking, hand tracking, is there anything that you have or that you're planning to release that just comes with presets or modules that just makes that a smoother?
So the Unity SDK on Tobii's Dev Zone does a lot of that for you with really good samples that you, in 15 minutes, you'll have up and running and just get to try it. And then you can start to iterate and tune depending on your specific use case.
Brilliant.
So,
Thank you.
thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure as always.
Awesome. Huge round of applause for these guys. That was great. Thank you so much.